Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome again. Today we're really excited to share with you the third session in our webinar series. The first session was about financing climate tech. The second session was about carbon credits. And now the third session is about showcasing impact using data. So really fortunate to be joined here by my two colleagues, Annie and Lam, who are part of our team collecting all the data on the climate techs and visualizing it. And most importantly, we're grateful to be joined today by Prabu, who is the lead data analyst at NAFAS, one of the climate heroes that is very actively using data to make a change. So, yeah, I think over to you, Annie. You're on mute, Annie.
Sorry. Thank you, Ollie, for the great introduction. And so before we get started, let me introduce you to who we are at Aquila. We're at the heart of connecting the key players in this sustainability ecosystem, which has banks, borrowers, IoT providers, and verifier. And our mission is really clear. We enable sustainable finance by reducing costs and mitigating risks relating to ESG KPI verification. So how do we do this? We do it through the power of real-time IoT data infrastructure that gives you the tool to track, verify, and monitor ESG metrics effectively and efficiently. Alongside Aquila, we also built a really thriving community of innovators, which is called Climate Hero Club. It is essentially an ecosystem, a platform where climate tech companies across Southeast Asia can connect, collaborate, and grow. And through our directory, our website, and exclusive events, partnership opportunities, we hope to bring more visibility to your effort in the climate tech space. So really buckle up. Today's journeys will be packed with a lot of insights and practical takeaways. And hopefully that would help you to unlock the full potential of your impact data. So let's begin with an exercise here. You can access this code from your own device and tell us about what impact metrics that are most relevant to your business.
So there's two options of accessing it. One is going to mentimeter.com and filling in the session code. Alternatively, you can click the link that I just shared in the chat box. And I'll use this opportunity as well to share that throughout the session, feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. They might be answered during the session or at the Q&A at the end. The chat box you can find by clicking the little chat icon in the bottom right of the Google Meet here. Back to you, Annie.
Thank you, Ollie. Can you share the Mentimeter?
We'll wait until after the first part to show the results.
Sure. All right. So this is the agenda for today. We can go over the ESG data landscape, the challenges, and we would discuss about how to turn those data into real value and what would you need to look out for when handling those data. And finally, we have NAFAS, Prabu from NAFAS joining to give you a real world example as a case study, and we can end and wrap it up with a Q&A. All right, I'm so excited. Okay, let's go for the first part. Make over to you, Lam.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Annie, for the great introduction, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. So first of all, let me talk about the impact data landscape. So when we think of impact data, most of what we think about is for sure the ESG data landscape. I'm pretty sure that most of us here certainly have heard about ESG, and we have a brief idea of what it means. So I'll just give it a really quick recap. What does ESG stand for? The E here is for environmental, so things like energy consumption, emissions, waste, and water. S stands for social, as in employee well-being, diversity, training, or how your company engages with the community. And finally, the G here is for governance, so thinking of transparency, board structure, ethics, and anti-corruption policy, etc. So for climate techs, most of you are naturally strong in the E bucket, but that doesn't mean that the other two should be ignored. As a matter of fact, investors and regulators actually look at the full picture of the three of them. Companies with strong ESG practices are about 2.5 times more likely to perform better during market downturns. So ESG isn't just about doing good for the planet. It's actually about doing good for your business too. In fact, ESG data is rapidly becoming a core element for strategic decisions. Aquila observed that investors now actually use ESG data to inform their decisions. So approximately 85% of them integrated into their investment frameworks. So this means that the better your ESG performance, the lower your risk, and the higher your returns. So by managing and leveraging your ESG data effectively, this is no longer just about compliances with regulations. It's actually about positioning yourself for better financing, better opportunities, and stronger market presence. However, it's also very important to understand that this is actually not just about having data, it's about having accurate data. And this is why in our session today, we will focus on not just collecting ESG data, but also on ensuring that the data we collect is credible, transparent, and useful. But first, let's zoom out for a moment and look at the global landscape of regulations and framework. So regulation and framework around ESG data are rapidly evolving. For example, I think some of you might have heard or definitely know about the International Financial Reporting Standard, the IFRS. There are two of them, S1 and S2. While S1 sets the global baseline for climate disclosures, S2 specifies requirements for climate-related disclosure. They are becoming actually mandatory in many markets, forcing companies to have to step up their reporting game. Coming to smaller market or more specific markets like EU, we have the CSRD, which is regulatory reporting for most EU companies, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. They mandate companies to disclose detailed information on the ESG impact, risks, and opportunities. And then coming to the Southeast Asia market, we have frameworks like the HKEX, which is Hong Kong Stock Exchange. We have the ASEAN taxonomy, and we have the Singapore Exchange, which also align with the global standards, but also more specifically tailored for the unique needs of the Southeast Asian market. From January 2025, these regions will require listed companies to report their Scope 1 and Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions. So what does it mean for us? It means that there's a massive shift in how companies in our region need to report and act on ESG performance. So we have gone over the framework and the standards. But to be honest, compliance isn't where the actual value relies. Real impact data is actually what matters. For most climate tech companies, especially in Southeast Asia region, our focus often revolves around frameworks, meaning that we try to make sure that everything is reported correctly. However, there's a lot of challenges. Compliance is only part of the equation. At the end of the day, impact is what will get you noticed, and more importantly, what will get you trusted. So the more you focus on reporting, the more you lose sight on the actual impact. Impact is about accuracy, local context, and data transparency. That is what investors want. They don't want inflated numbers. They want a real deal, and they want to see the impact happening right now in real time. So what we what we need to do is to get away from generic assumption and start focusing on data that can actually drive changes. And that is what's lacking in the industry right now. So we are here to change that. But first of all, we need to look at a real world example of why this is so important and why accurate impact data is very critical. So let's look at a case study of rainforest carbon credits. Recently, The Guardian did an investigation into the Verras carbon credits, which is the world-leading carbon credit certification standard. Verras is used by major big companies, thinking of names like Shell, Gucci, and Disney. So they are like in various industries. What The Guardian found was actually very troubling. Over 90% of these rainforest credits was actually worthless. They didn't represent any real deforestation reductions at all. Moreover, the investigation also found that deforestation risk was overstated by as much as 400%. This is definitely wasn't just a small mistake. It means that company was claiming carbon neutrality based on inflated impact. They rely on these credits to offset their emissions without realizing that they weren't actually doing anything for the climate at all. This is not just a theoretical issues anymore. These major brands have all the offsets, rely on them for net zero claims, and proudly market it as carbon neutral. But the offsets that they purchase might not be working as expected. It was worthless. So this should be, for us, it should be a wake-up call. If companies, including some of the biggest names in the world, are buying like such phantom credits with no actual environmental benefits, we need to take a hard look at our own impact data. Transparency and verification are not optional. It should not be optional. They're mandatory. So if we don't have a clear and verifiable data, it's just gonna be like these rainforest credits, worthless. So how can we address what are the key challenges in impact data? ESG data is great, impact data is great. Why is it so hard to actually properly report on them? Actually, as a matter of fact, 85% of companies struggle with ESG data collection. So don't worry, you're not alone. Most of us here are in the same boat. The lack of standardization in the data landscape, beginning with the lack of consistency on even just like very basic thing like a definition of ESG itself, it just gives a broad range of challenges for financial services organization as they attempt to like secure and exploit these ESG data. So that just leads to most of them, about 89% of investors that they would actually like to see some form of reporting ESG performance measure against a set of globally consistent standards. And it's becoming more and more of a prominent need in the industry. Diving deeper into the challenges in the data journey. So first of all, starting with the very first step, collecting the data. Collecting the data is not easy. Why? Because most of our data are fragmented and inconsistent. So ESG data can come from different multiple sources. We collect it from the IoT sensors, supplier surveys, manual reports, which leads to a lot of fragmentation and inconsistencies. So what we've seen is that companies usually struggle to gather accurate and reliable data, especially when it comes from third-party suppliers in areas like Scope 3 emissions. Then there comes the challenge of storing the data itself. Companies usually face data overload, meaning that ESG data is usually very complex and they are unstructured. They can be stored in multiple formats. We have seen like data being sent in the forms of Excel, PDF, CSV, etc., etc. So this just makes storing data super challenging. After we conquer, let's say we've overcome the challenges of the collecting the data, storing the data, then there comes the challenge of analyzing the data. The most common practice that we've seen in the industry is usually to manually process the data. which is a very time-consuming, error-prone, and very efficient practice. We mostly still rely on a spreadsheet or manual calculation to determine the key ESG metrics like carbon emissions or energy savings. And with all these challenges, of course, would lead to the lack of trust coming from investor. So even with the right data, investors usually don't have a lot of trust in companies' ESG claims because there's not of consistency. There's so many challenges, especially when the data is so difficult to verify, or if they lack a credible audit trail. So all these challenges really undermine the investor confidence, and it makes it hard for both stakeholders, the investor and the climate tech companies, to attract capital itself. Now that we've covered challenges, let's talk about more of the exciting part, the solutions. So how can we turn these challenges into opportunities? We believe that the answer lies in automation, real-time data collection, and verification. So the first step in unlocking the value of your ESG data is to automate your data collection. So with IoT sensor, smart meters, and cloud platforms, you can start gathering reliable real-time data that help tracking key metrics like energy usage, water consumption, or water generation, etc. So these sensors are not just for compliance, as I mentioned. They actually provide actionable insights that would even help you further optimize operation for your own company. It helps with reducing costs and even manage climate risk, which is what we're all here for, right? And then the next step to help with the challenge is to start centralizing your data. So instead of pulling data from various multiple different sources, what we want to do is to implement an ESG data management platform that help with consolidating all of your data into one system. So this would help enabling you to make data-driven decisions more quickly with higher degree of accuracy. And finally, data alone isn't enough. Verification is also very essential. We need to make sure that ESG data is credible and auditable. So this is where third-party verification comes in. An independent, trusted third party would help to ensure that your data is not only accurate, but also verifiable. And this is very critical in building your trust with investors and other stakeholders. So here are some of the key reporting tools and technologies that we've seen are becoming more and more prominent in the market right now. So first of all, we have the sensor and smart meters. As you can see in this diagram, it is very, very useful. It's like implementing it early on would help to ensure real-time insights and accurate data to showcase your ESG impact. So this is a very important tool that are being more and more commonly implemented by businesses. Then we also have emissions management solutions, thinking of blockchain technology. And then finally, of course, we cannot miss the AI trend, right? So AI is actually really useful for materiality assessment and automated reporting. It can help streamlining your assessment, save time, and of course, ensure greater accuracy in your reports. So in fact, it's actually not just like nice to have tool. They are pretty essential for climate tech companies like us because we need to help. There's a need to keep pace with evolving regulatory frameworks and especially with investor expectation. And so now I would give the floor back to Annie. She would be talking about turning these data into actual impact.
Thanks, Lam, for a very cool and informative overview of the problems that we're facing right now. And also thanks for highlighting the solutions. So the next the next part would be quite technical. So please make sure that you have the notes with you, right? So now you have collected the data, and let's bring everything together and turn those into impact. And as my colleague have said, it's not collecting and verifying the data is not only good for the planet, it's also very good for your business. For one, clear impact metrics data would give you a competitive edge. When a climate company can clearly demonstrate its environmental and social impact with credible data, it would help you to stand out from competitors and differentiate and position yourself in the market. Second, it would make your company operationally sharper, so you can easily spot inefficiency like excessive energy consumptions, waste leaks, to reduce costs, and then detect the risk much earlier by having those visibility into the hotspot in your operation, and also set realistic performance target later on. This would essentially create like a feedback loop where data doesn't just sit in the report, but it's also actually drive cost saving and risk reduction. And last but not least, good impact data can open doors to better financing. A climate-focused investor or impact investor in general are increasingly offering better terms to companies with really strong ESG performance. So what does it mean? It means lower interest rate, better repayment condition, and more capital for growth. And this high quality impact data can also help you to improve access to other green financing instruments like sustainability linked loan, bonds, or blended finance. And it also helps to enables monetizations opportunities like carbon credits, for example. So yeah, as we think about leveraging the impact data, it's really important to recognize that each industry would have its own set of relevant metrics. So there's no one size fits all. And by understanding these really like industry specific metrics, it would allow you to tailor your data collection and reporting efforts to focus on what truly matters. And so let's take a look at some of the examples here. First of all, we have solar energy. On the left side, we can start with a very simple piece of input data, which is electricity generated. This is the total energy your solar system produces, and it's usually tracked automatically in your solar meter. Really straightforward, right? From that single input, we can unlock several other metrics. First one, everyone knows this, is CO2 emission avoided. We arrived to this by multiplying the electricity generated with the grid emission factor locally. So we can actually quantify how much carbon pollution has been prevented. A little note on the methodology for CO2. When I say CO2 avoided, I actually mean CO2 equivalent on 100 years basis, aka global warming potential 100. So that's the based on the GHG protocol standard, and it's also what banks, auditors, and big corporation need for apple to apple kind of comparison here. However, if your project is methane heavy, methane is also a greenhouse gas that is more potent, but it stays in the atmosphere for a shorter time than other greenhouse gases. So it has more like a short-term impact, right? And so if your project is methane heavy, like for example, landfill diversion, for example, right? So we can show like, in addition to a 100-year lens, we can show a 20 years lens as a sensitivity. So we can show both the short-term impact and long-term impacts, but just to make sure that we also keep the global warming potential calculation to make it consistent with the market practice. Right. The next one is household power, which is calculated by using electricity generated divided by average household consumption. This is a really powerful way and human way to communicate the impact to the world. Next one, trees planted. Everyone understand it's very intuitive that a tree as a symbol of sustainability, right? So by converting the avoided emission into the number of trees that will need to be planted to achieve the same outcome. Here we use the annual tree sequestration value here. And last but not least, we have the money save, which you can track the financial benefit. It's typically calculated based on the energy saving from using solar power instead of buying electricity from the grid, right? So it can be calculated by multiplying the electricity generated with the local tariff for electricity. Let me run quickly through some of other examples. Here we have EV, follows somewhat of similar structure, but it reflects a different part of the ecosystem. We can first start to calculate the fuel avoided by multiplying the distance travel with the fuel consumption rate. Really depend on the type of vehicle, the ICE vehicle, and by that we can know exactly how many liters of gasoline or diesel that would have been burned if that EV isn't on the road. And from there, the next step is to convert those into CO2 emission avoided, just like solar, and also trees planted by showing how many trees that have been needed to absorb the same CO2. For the next example, energy efficiency, we can start collecting the electricity consumption before and after the energy efficiency measure, applying the measure. And then from that, we can quantify the energy save with IP-MVP approach, of course, adjusting for weather, occupancy, and any other operational changes. And those can be later on convert to also CO2, trees plan. And please note that like the metrics for energy efficiency is different because we are talking about reducing the demand for energy and not actually like generating new energy here, but it follows of the same core goal, which is reducing the emission and saving the money. And finally, for plastic recycling, it's this one's a bit different from energy-focused technologies like solar or EV, but also the same principle applies. We'll start by collecting the amount of plastic recycle as an input metrics to track how much plastic waste has been diverted from landfills into the recycling process. And then we can convert those into CO2 emission avoided using the EF baseline and EF project for that specific type of plastic. And then we can convert that into bottle equivalents, or some can say plastic leakage, trees planted, and the last one, recycling resales value, is somewhat of similar to money save. It tracks the economic benefit of recycling, is the opportunity to monetize the recycled plastic. So what's important here to note is that over the example is that from the single data point, we can derive to multiple layers of values: environmental, social, and financial. And this is exactly how climate tech companies can translate the technical and operational data into real impact and meaningful data that are relevant to investors and customers. And please note that these are only some examples of impact metrics. The list is not exhaustive, and it very much might expand in the future. And so, as you can see, handling the impact data can be quite complex because you need to deal with a lot of methodologies and calculations, and it can be frustrating sometimes. So here's a few things to look out for when handling the impact data. So one of the first rule always to keep in mind is to use realistic assumptions and always be conservative. You want to be conservative in order to avoid overestimating your impact. Let me give you an example with the previous EV calculation that we have just go through, fuel avoided. So when we calculate fuel avoided, we multiply the distance travel by the fuel consumption rate. Right, simple. However, you need to select the fuel consumption rate would vary depending on the type of model for the vehicle that you select. The impact for, let's say, a small sedan isn't the same as a big, like heavy SUV, right? So what's the right way to handle the data? The step one that we would recommend is to pick the most representative model. If you have the data for it, you can do average, or you can pick the most representative, just to make sure that you have your data as representative. However, if it's really hard to pin down the data, then we should go for the conservative approach. And in this case, you should pick the model with the lowest fuel consumption, and then proceed with the calculation. And so in the previous example, you can see there's like different multiple data points for a single value for the fuel consumption rate, right? And in this case, on top of that, you can conduct a sensitivity analysis. So same example, for EV industry, you have different vehicle types, and it's really important to test the range of possible outcomes rather than like relying your assumption, everything on a single assumption. So what do we do here? We do a sensitivity checks to see like what are the different scenarios, because there's no one right answer, and everything here we do is an estimation and a prediction. And so we do this, first of all, to see the range where your impact can lie. And so you can, kind of predict that and communicate that to your investor clearly. And second, if like a single input can be sensitive to your calculation, let's say if you slightly change one value and it can significantly change the final result, it means it's sensitive. And so you can also like really look out for that in your calculation. The next one is to always declare assumptions and explain your data sources. No matter how accurate your calculation can be, the assumption behind them are hidden when people would always question the result. And that's why being upfront about what assumptions you made and where the data comes from is absolutely essential. Next one, the fourth, whenever possible, prioritize using local data. So here you have an example for emission factors varying based on the countries. Even as you can see, for Indonesia, you can have it more breakdown based on the city and based on the region. And so it's really good to pick up those like specific regional data to make sure it's not generic, but it's like really reflect what's actually happening on ground. And so a few other metrics that are also really local based is you can think of like retail price for electricity, or household electricity consumption for the household power metric, or the for EV it can be like daily fleet average for driver. It can really vary depending on the traffic, for example. And next one is to always account for time dependency in your impact calculation. As we all know, climate data is constantly evolving, and the emission factor, for example, can change over time. So here we give an example for China's emission factor over the years, and you can see that like in the grid emission, they are declining as the country shift toward like renewable energy here. So if you're calculating the CO2 saving over a period of time, you need to account for these changes and avoid like overestimating your impact. And this is one of quite a painful problems, double counting. So always be careful of double counting, especially CO2 double counting, which is when the same greenhouse emission reduction or removal is claimed by two or more entities toward like their climate goals. This issue can arise in carbon offsetting or climate accounting, where it might result to double selling or double issuance of credits, double claimings, which leads to inflated of carbon footprint and a failure to achieve any genuine global climate impact. So in reality, there's only two kinds of claim. If you own the right to the reduction, let's say you're a solar company and you own the panel, then you can claim it as your own impact. However, if you don't own the rights to the reduction, you can say you enable or you finance the reduction, not that you own it. Let me give you another example. For EV industry, let's say you're an EV company and you work with a delivery platform, right? So the EV operator can report the reduction on the scope 1 and 2, and the platform can report on scope 3. But this really depends on like the agreement, the contract between different companies that operate in the same impact of like how many, how do you divide that sort of impact. But just be really clear upfront about double counting. And finally, the last piece of the puzzle is third-party verification. This is essentially the ultimate step to ensure that your data's credibility and integrity, because self-report impacts can easily lead to, as my colleague said, data discrepancy or even the risk of greenwashing if not properly verified. So here, a third-party verifier like Aquila can help you to validate your impact data and turn that into something that investor can trust. Can make sure that the math, the methodology, the framework is consistent and is coherent with international standard, and every data point, every result has a clear audit trail, which helps your company with better investability in the future. And so, yeah, that wraps up my part. That's something to note for when handling the data. So now let's take a look at a real world example of a good data practice from NAFAS.
Yes, thank you, Annie. So before we have an engaging conversation with Prabu, I just wanted to quickly take 30 seconds to just share here in parallel the impact metrics that have been submitted. So some of the shared metrics by the listeners and viewers here are, for example, interest margin. So I guess this has to do with financing interest, or maybe if they are financing their clients, what financing interest they're earning there. Definitely relating between the interest rate received on financing and then the margin or the internal rate of return or the profit that you're able to earn out of your clients, depending on your vertical, of course. It's very important. So clear that this is a key point, and we'll actually take that into account going forward in the type of work we're doing. Secondly, sales in USD. So sales numbers are definitely very important too to track. I think showing impact in terms of sales numbers, for example, if you're a recycler and you're selling a certain amount of recycled goods, you can definitely show impact through that, or amount of sales of solar energy or sales of e-vehicles. So depending on your business model, definitely very relevant too. Emission-free kilometers. We actively track this for some of our clients in EV. Definitely in EV, one of the most important metrics to track how many kilometers have actually been driven, because you can put bikes out there, but if they're not being driven, then the impact is less. Actually, an interesting anecdote. So electric bikes versus fuel combustion engine bikes. So the electric bikes consume or cost in many cases more than an internal combustion engine bike. But what becomes interesting is the amount of cost per kilometer is much lower. And so if you drive an EV bike over a certain distance, you actually start to save money compared to a bike that requires fuel with an internal combustion engine. So that is why, for example, many of the electric vehicle two-wheeler companies that we work with are supplying their bikes to the kind of like ride sharing, so ride hailing or delivery companies like Grab, Gojek, or for example, Lazada or Blitz or Dash. Some of these names might ring a bell. Lastly, carbon removal, definitely important too. Important to distinguish here between carbon removal and emission avoidance. So sequestering carbon is very key in the whole environmental challenge with carbon emissions and the amount of CO2 in the air. So to remove carbon means to actually pull carbon out. So this can be with planting trees or with direct air capture type of solutions. Emissions avoided can be in the case of solar energy or electric vehicles or other types of bioenergy, whereby you're creating energy that would have otherwise been created or used with combustion or fossil fuels. So that's a little bit on some of the important metrics to each of the viewers here. I'll stop sharing. Maybe we'll pin for everyone the case study slides again. So thank you for joining us today, Prabu. Really excited to have you here.
Hello, I'm excited too, as well.
I think if we go to the next slide, maybe Prabu, would you like to share a brief intro on what NAFAS does and what problem you're solving?
Yeah, so basically, NAFAS is well known as an air quality company. We've been doing this for the past 5-6 years, handling air quality data. But actually, at the moment, we want to establish ourselves as a health and wellness company using air quality as an approach, right? We develop technology to help urban citizens breathe healthier air. And I guess the problem that we're trying to solve is more or less is health issue that happened in Indonesia and actually hopefully around the world that caused by an air quality issue. So I think this basically started why NAFAS is using a different approach to do this stuff, right? Even though here basically we are more also known for technology-based company. We're having a physical solution as well. As you can see on the slide, we have a monitor and also like a purification system that basically help our users to get to breathe a healthier air, because Indonesia it's actually a main issue, but most of the people don't realize it, or maybe they don't really care about it. But basically here in NAFAS, we want to prove that why people should care, right? So I think that's basically started why we start NAFAS at the first place. So I think I haven't introduced myself. My name is Prabu. I'm a data analyst leading a team in data department here in NAFAS. And I've been doing this for the past 5 years. And for me as well, like I wasn't a sustainability person at the beginning. I was a computer science person and a data science person. But then I met my founder and I start to dig into the story of like why NAFAS being created and why people should care. Then that's why I started to join NAFAS since then. That's it. I think that's good started, Ollie. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabu.
Yeah.
If you go to the next slide, Annie, I think there's some more visuals. What mainly interested you about IoT and air quality data, and why did NAFAS start exploring it?
Yeah, I think for IoT and data, because when we started NAFAS, people start data become like a major part of metrics that being involved in every company. So data itself give, like I think it was mentioned earlier by Annie, by Lam, that it can give like a strong impression when you present it rightly, right? And why IoT? Because like IoT can give you a real physical solution that can be felt, they can people feel, while at the same time it's like it's collecting data, and the data can be used by us to tell the world like what's happened, right? What our IoT IoT system get, and basically it's easier for us because like our topics that NAFAS trying to bring is about like air quality and health, which you cannot see, right? It's not visible by our eyes. And how do you know like, if the air is good or bad? You can see the color, right? It's not like water or maybe food. Like in terms of like air quality, you can really see. It's not a visible thing. So that's why we develop an IoT system that actually help us to get data, and from the data itself, we try to make people realize what we are trying to do. So yeah.
Fantastic. And what I really like about your trajectory was that you initially started with sensing, and then you realized how big this problem is, and then you thought, oh, how can we actually solve it? And something that really struck me is I didn't know this before NAFAS informed me about it, that actually we think that maybe inside is different air quality than outside because we have windows, right? And that from your measurements, you saw that when the air quality was bad, for example, in Jakarta outside, that people thought they're okay inside, but actually the same bad air quality was just coming inside as well. And so actually using your purification system makes life healthier for people. And I think one of the key impact metrics is maybe more on the social side. Even though it's about the environment, the social aspect is people live longer if they have cleaner air, right?
Exactly like that. So I think that's one of the myths that I'm trying not to bring today, because it will cause us like more time to discuss about like indoor and outdoor. But basically, yes. So when people say that I live in my house without anything, I'm basically safe from air pollution outside, right? So that's not entirely true, right? Especially in Indonesia, I think the source of pollution could come from any part of your house or any part of your basically like your neighborhood. It's not like in other country where you have like industrial and residential site on two different part in your city. But in Indonesia, it could be like, this is my house, and maybe 50 meters, especially in Jakarta, 50 to 100 meters from here is already like a business district. So that's basically explain like the simple way that you're not really safe without an air quality solution at your house.
And how are you making sure the data is accurate, and what are the downsides if it isn't?
Okay, so how we make ensuring the data is correct and accurate all the time. Of course, we have to do like what we call as calibration to our sensors and our basically all of our system. This calibration is being done by comparing it to like a more reliable hardware or IoT out there that we could use as a reference. We call it reference monitor or reference devices. And this calibration, it should be done by maybe like every year at least, or maybe every 6 months. And if it isn't, we have to make it. It's always accurate, Ali. We cannot present unreliable data. So we develop a system that maybe makes us internally knows that when we should calibrate the data before people who told before our users told us about it. So before it happens, we already have to like calibrate or maybe do adjustment to our system to ensure the data is always accurate all the time.
Great. And how do you present the data, and how do you make sure it is who is your recipient? Is it businesses? Is it consumers? And how do you make the data relevant to them and easy to understand?
That's actually one of the main challenges that we have to actually make the data relevant. I think it's not only NAFA's problem, but everyone's problem when it comes to data. To make it relevant, especially to our users, to our stakeholders and investors. But how we display it, we have since we talk about air quality and health, it's always tied with science and facts and research. So whenever we try to present a data that give a huge impact, the impact data itself, we have to tie ourselves like with a reliable source or organization most of the time. Either we do a research about it, or maybe we ask an expertise to come to like an experts to come and just collaborate with us to basically produce a more reliable insights from our data. Other than that, then we just like do a lot of research basically in the past 4 years. We do a lot of A/B testing and trial and error about of our data until we found our I think we found like the best formula that out there that we can use. Then we can present it to the people. But how we present it, out of the complex research and analytics that being done inside the NAFAS, we try to visualize it in a more friendlier way, so everyone could understand. And we try to emphasize it in a message that saying that what is the issue here, not directly mentioning the science behind it most of the time. Yeah.
Maybe last question for you, Prabu. So how big is your fleet of devices? Can you share something on that?
The total devices that we have.
Yeah.
So I think we are close to like 10,000 devices being developed right now.
Wow.
Sorry. And then I think if we talk about device, then I have to talk about the data being recorded as well. Every month we recorded more than 200 million data. And
Data points, right?
Data points, exactly. And so far we already have up to like 7 billion data for the past few years. Out of like our sensors that are being spread, we have like indoor sensors and outdoor sensors. So combined, it's close to 7 billion. And we have outdoor sensors as well. In total, we have like 400 sensors deployed, combined for research and for public.
Fantastic. With that, I would like to open the floor to anyone of the listeners. If you have any questions, maybe you want to write them down or raise your hand or just unmute yourself. John.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. Thanks, Prabu, for the the demonstration, and always super interesting. But my question is maybe not for you; it's for the other guys. So you guys are matching lenders to financing for clean tech or green tech, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we do, indeed.
Right. So how important is it for the companies that are leveraging your financing, or even if they got the financing from a development organization, how important is it that they actually, I'm sure for some it's a term of the financing, but maybe you can just expand on that a little bit, right? Like how much is this reporting required or essential for the kind of financing that you guys arrange, whether through you guys or through somebody who would be in your ecosystem? So that's my first question. I do have a second question, but why don't I just start with that?
So you hit a sensitive nerve here in me. This is one of the reasons we're really driving this. So it is required that companies report impact data to certain impact investors. Now, unfortunately, you could put one number in that report, that CO2 emissions avoided, and maybe not even calculated correctly, and they'll be able to check their box and you move on, right? We're very unhappy with that. And we believe that, as time passes by and our climate crisis worsens, that these things will become more stringent. and I hope it happens sooner, also through our initiatives. But there are some investors that are much more diligent on it. So I know, for example, if you receive any money, for example, from IFC, you're going to be spending more time doing reporting than doing your actual work. So there's a fine line kind of in between that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Do you guys, through your, you had a slide there with you guys in the middle from, questionable stats to vetted or validated stats. Do you guys provide that service?
Yes, correct. So we do three things. One is the financing. The second is carbon credits. So we help facilitate carbon credits registration and sales. And then lastly, we also help to validate the impact data for both cases.
Yeah. And if I just wanted to have the vetting or the validating to start, because I got a deal directly from IFC, you could provide that service.
Correct. So actually, the basic tier of our validation services are free. So we can connect with you after the call, after the webinar, sorry, to start providing that to you. And then if it becomes very in depth, of course, then there's a commercial model attached. But typically the highest level one is a free service we do.
Okay. And sorry, and I don't want to monopolize the questions, but maybe just my second question was more for your thoughts. So maybe one step removed, there are equity investors that may have an ESG or a clean tech or green tech thesis, and so that like across their fund they may be accumulating these numbers. So I guess my question, and I don't actually know this directly, but maybe you have an answer to that, like how important that is with some venture capital or equity investors. That's number one. And number two is the other opportunity that we've seen, especially in B2B models, is to pass on the impact to the actual customers of the venture. And I guess, I know that's a very ill-formed question, but I guess I'm just looking for a sense from you on. Yeah.
So from what we're seeing, the reporting impact data to venture capital is not so important yet. They do like to hear about it, but it's not a hard requirement. And then in terms of passing the data to impact data to clients, that's something that many clients are starting to ask for. Many of the climate techs we work with are actually reporting data to clients in Europe, US, Singapore, places that are actually doing carbon taxing, for example. And then it definitely becomes mandatory in terms of passing on the impact. So saying that you're a climate tech, you're a small player, but the impact sort of can belong to the client. That's something that's also happening for sure. So the client, it depends a little bit on the contracting, right? So if you have in your contract, we offer this service, and the impact we are creating, it belongs to you, and you can count it in your books, then that's possible. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's connect outside of this call.
Would love to. Thank you, John, for the great questions. Any other questions? All right. Well, then I think maybe some closing thoughts from my side. What we would really like to see happening over time is that more and more data becomes public, that registries of data become integrated, that there's no double counting, but also that it motivates more players to enter into climate tech and to create an impact. And not only for the environment, but also maybe as a closing anecdote, increasing disposable income, especially for those who have low income or in the low income bracket. For example, a Gojek or a Grab driver or a homeowner who has very small energy consumption, but that can switch to solar through a pre-financed model and therefore can have an increased disposable income that really changes their lives, right? So I think these kind of metrics are very valid to report as well, and will help with fundraising, especially on the social side. So with that, I would love to thank Annie, Lam, Prabu for helping facilitate this session, and also for all the listeners and viewers today, and everyone who watches this online afterwards. We'll be sharing with everyone the videos on both Spotify and YouTube for each of our sessions, and we'll keep you informed if we continue this webinar later on. So thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Ollie. Thanks, Prabu and Lam,
Thank you.
and everyone.
Thank you.